A while back, I set out to assemble an almost free hi-fi system that I myself would enjoy listening to.
If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake, baked a cake, baked a cake. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. How'd you do, how'd you do, how'd you do?
You shouldn't have to be rich to enjoy something like that.
The first thing I decided on was finding some small speakers from my teenagehood. Are those good sounding today, I wondered? And I found a pair. They cost me like 30 euros. They were mint condition, never exposed to the sun or anything like that, so they look pretty nice and are fully functioning. It's a very, very light speaker made from some flimsy wood. No wonder it was cheap. Sounds really hollow. And in the back, typical of the time, we have these nasty little terminals that won't accept anything near a banana plug or anything like that. It simply doesn't fit in there. It will take a normal utility wire. This is actually a real audio cable. It's called the Arson Audio Black Edition SC1. So it might be oxygen free and all that, but that's the kind of cable it takes. So this is also very typical for the time, the cable here. I even got the receipt for this pair, and it has also fully functioning front fabrics that can just be attached in the little holes there. The driver has a foam edge that seems to be holding up okay. It's a little dry, but the speakers are 40 years old, right? And then you have the classic dome tweeter there. And I haven't looked at the crossover, but yeah, it sounds like it's working as it's supposed to. Impedance 8 ohms and recommended amplifier power 10 to 60 watts. Sensitivity 89 dBs. Okay, so that's the speaker, right? Then I needed an amp. It's a pretty small speaker and not that powerful. So of course, in order to make a system that I would enjoy, I would definitely also need a subwoofer. And that led me to the amp, because how do I manage a subwoofer in a great and easy to use way? That got me thinking of old AV receivers. There's a lot of AV receivers lying around, and they're not very popular because all the video connections on those things are totally outdated. The decoding of bitstream audio has changed, and it means that old AV receivers, they are pretty worthless if you want to use them with modern equipment and sound formats. Are they holding up if just being used as a stereo amp? I mean, all we need is the amp and some subwoofer management. And subwoofer management is built into most AV receivers, so that would make it really easy. And then I visited an old pal that just got 2 Technics SX6 AV receivers. Those must be from the beginning of the 90s or something like that. He got those for free. And he said, don't you want one of these? And of course, I looked at it and it had all the functionality we need. So, of course, I said, yes, please. And that means that the AV receiver being used for the ultra cheap setup here was free. We are going to use this as a stereo amp. And it's actually pretty powerful. It's 100 watts per channel, so-called class H plus or something like that. The only minus is it actually turns pretty hot when it's working hard. And in the back, there's even a fan that will kick in if it works really hard. But since we're only using 2 channels and for stereo, it's probably really nice. We find line inputs here, several of those. I'm using the CD input. And here you would connect the CD player maybe, or a little streamer maybe. Whatever source, it could be a phone with a cable adapter or something like that. Doesn't matter. But we are only using this for the amp and to manage a subwoofer. And behold, even here on the front plate, we see a subwoofer level control. Ain't that cool? And if we open this smoky lid, we can see all the goodies in here. Here we find a section with a bass and treble control and a balance control. This is the low pass filter used for the subwoofer. Here we can filter the sub. So having all this control directly on the amp is really cool instead of having to lie down on the floor and mess around with some settings on the sub. This means that we have a good chance of being able to achieve a good balance by ear using a subwoofer with these little small, not that powerful speakers. They will get tremendous help from a subwoofer. Our spending so far is 40 euros total. For the subwoofer, I went to my own personal stock and looked around what I might have purchased and had left over or whatever. And down there on the floor in a corner, I found a Yamaha SW300. It's a small home cinema sub, something like that. That is pretty powerful, not that big. If we take this sub and corner place it, we will be able to get a pretty decent output out of it, as the corners will amplify the subwoofer's output. Here we look at the back panel of the subwoofer. It has the ability to let the speaker signal pass through if you don't have a dedicated line output, but we do have a dedicated line output. It can be connected normally with a left and right signal that will be summed, or we can use a dedicated LFE input. That's what we're going to use here. Oh shit! God damn it. It has an option to turn on and off automatically. It worked pretty bad, so I set it to off, so I will decide when it's on and off. And also you are able to reverse the phase, and it has a parameter for setting up the subwoofer for either movie or music. High cut in the higher setting, as we will be managing all the crossovers from the amp. There's really no further setting up here other than getting power to this active sub, turning it on, placing it in the corner, and it will be ready to rock. So this will be the resting place for the sub that will just sit here and be subby in the corner. Great. To exploit the maximum SPL we can get out of this system, tuck them up against the wall a little bit. There might be like 1 feet to the back wall, so they have a little air there. And they will also be pretty much in line with the subwoofer, so we don't have to worry that much about timing issues and things like that. So that's the basic setup, and let's hear how it sounds. What you see here in front of you is actually the microphone setup just behind the listening position. I will now be measuring my placement to make sure I'm actually sitting perfectly and the speakers are spaced right. And then I'm going to do some listening. And here it is spot on. Perfectly spaced, and we are sitting like 2 meters and 27 centimeters, something like about 7 feet. 7 feet away. That's pretty decent. And it sounds pretty focused. Since the remote is volume part here is not working, we are just going to use the player instead. That has its own volume function, and then just crank up the AV receiver to 12 o'clock. Must say I'm pretty impressed with that little subwoofer there. I will turn it down a little bit. I think it's a little too overwhelming. That sounds more natural to me. But I know that it's been worth. And then there's another problem. I can actually locate the sound of the bass pretty much. So I think our crossover frequency or our cutoff frequency here is too high. I will turn it down a little bit and bring in a little more of that bass going to the general signal from the bass control there. Let's see how that works. Yeah. It feels like springtime in winter. I must say I'm pretty impressed. And for some reason, maybe because there's more distortion in an old system like this, I don't feel the need to play so loud. I will do some SPL measurements in a moment, but it is warm sounding. It's very cozy. Gotta do some more listening.
Feels like Christmas in June. It feels like heaven has opened up its gates for me and you, yeah. And every time I close my eyes, I thank the Lord that I got you, yeah. And you got me too.
Okay, yeah, the sense of depth in the sound image is not that profound here. And the upper mid-range is a little on the hard side. I was expecting something far worse. Okay, so let's try to listen to some really serious recordings here. I will make my way into the Sonic Snacks playlist here and use Roon to play back through the X45 that is currently the source being connected to the Technics AV receiver. And I'm just going to play some different samples and see what I get out of that, of the tracks we usually sample. Yeah, right away I'm feeling the need to actually shave off a bit of that top end using that treble knob and maybe add a little more bass in. More often than not, it's not very large corrections that are needed. You need to do a little correction and then listen to a couple of tracks and just feel your way through when you're just listening.
I've looked all around me.
At these listening levels, we are feeling a little bit pressured. So let us just see what we're actually working with here.
I've looked all around me.
That's what would usually be referred to as pretty decent listening levels, right? So that's fine. We got a 90 dB peak here. Let's explore the limits a bit, like this one, the yellow siren singing. Like, what? Wow. Yeah. Did you hear that little click right there? That's definitely the bass drivers being pushed to their limit. He sing. Okay, I'm pretty surprised, especially with the help they get from the sub. It's very decent. I'm very happy with this, and also the amp. It's probably not the best sounding amp I ever heard, but it's not half bad either. And it was free. I mean, it has a warmish sound. It's a little, the whole thing is a little dense, you can say. You don't have the same amount of insight that you would have with some really high resolution speakers and amp. But is it bad sound? Not at all. It's very compelling, and I actually love the sound of voices on this. It feels just right in my ear, the way they deliver the mid-range here. Of course, the top end, yeah, a little hard. It needs to be shaven off, or otherwise it's very dominating. So let's figure out what we're actually working with here. I will do in the listening position frequency response measurement with the settings that I put on the system so far. And let's see how that looks. Here we have the measuring microphone, which is a mini DSP UMic 1. And in order to do this, I will make a series of measurements so I get an idea of what is what. And I will also use the Linkdorf TDI 3400 here to actually do a room perfect room correction and see how that affects the overall response. And I will also try to do a complete setup on the Linkdorf here, utilizing the subwoofer as well. It's pretty good at integrating subs. I'll see what's the actual difference between using a hyper modern amplifier like this. I have called this the most advanced integrated amplifier in the world. And something like this old AV receiver here that also has the ability to do some LFE management. This will be an exciting listen to compare these two amplifier options to see what can extract the most musical joy from this old speaker setup.
Much later.
Okay, so that was quite a measurement session I went through there, noticing peaks and dips of the subwoofer and applying a filter to try to correct some of the worst peaks that are not related to room modes in this room. Also, I noticed a really annoying, pretty powerful spike at around 114 Hertz on the DALI 2s. Pretty significant and probably a part of its original tuning to make it sound a little more impressive in the low end, even though it's really not capable of going deep at all. So we want the subwoofer to step in there and help us on the way. So I corrected that very large peak before running the Room Perfect measurement. Room Perfect could probably figure it out itself, but I did it manually by applying a filter. And then I ran the Room Perfect, and the result of the whole thing is this response. So on the Technics system, what we got by ear was pretty different from what the TD3400 is able to do because there's so many more filters available. So it would be really interesting to hear the differences between this magic modern setup using room correction and the by ear little tweaks that was possible to do with the SX AX6. So now we'll go and listen some more to the Sonic Snacks playlist. With all the room correction in place, to me it sounds pretty warm, very smooth, no weird lumps or bumps or anything like that.
Well, now it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I can't even close my eyes.
Absolutely nothing that is nippy anymore here. We got a very, very warmish, very smooth sound. It's almost like it's been buttered up a little bit in all the cavities. That's pretty amazing. The sub is leaner, it seems, to my ear. It had some annoying bumps and dips that are completely ironed out. So now we have a decent response, I would say, down to 50, 40 hertz, something like that, which is plenty with such a little system like this. And also the DALI 2 seems to have much more surplus now because they don't have to work with the lower frequencies. We were not able to filter those out using the AV receiver, remember? That's one of the advantages by using a product like the Linkdorf 3400, that we have all these filters available, that we can make low-end cutoffs, we can make speaker EQs specifically before doing the room correction that will try to correct for the effects of the room. And then on top of that, we can even apply a voicing filter. In this case, though, I have not used any voicing filters, and I'm pretty satisfied so far. I need to hear some more, of course. I will grab something with some nice voices and some more thin sounding and some older stuff, and see how it all turns out here. Weight in the bass. Usually we can always hear tape noise in this recording. It's also present but not in your face at all. The dynamics of that rim shot not as tightly delivered as on higher resolution systems.
Early in the morning, beats a cup of coffee for starting off the day.
Yeah, this tuning turns out to be very warm sounding. I'm just gonna listen to it without Room Perfect, but still with the speaker EQ filtering.
Good days are coming your way. This old world wouldn't be half as bad. It wouldn't be half as sad. Each and everybody had it had.
Yeah, it might be personal preference, but I definitely find the vocal to be less nasal sounding when Room Perfect is not applied here, strangely enough. But that's what my ears are telling me.
Nothing turns a day on, really gets it dawning, like a little bit of loving from some loving someone.
Yeah, but of course we get a fuller, more smooth low end with the Room Perfect filter applied. And here we have two different ways of listening to it: a global filter that is kind of a middle down the road correction that will work more generally in the room, and then we have a focus position correction that is right here where I'm sitting for the optimal sound according to the system. Wow. Okay, this recording is really interesting because we have the deep sub sweeps going like boom. Those sounds can easily be sounding, you know, boomy in certain places or non-linear. Here we get a really smooth boom. Maybe the microphones can capture that. I will try to play it again. Turn up the volume a bit. Coming. That was too loud. This actually sounds very decent. It's not that kind of hi-fi sound where everything is revealed, every little detail, and you can really look into the sound. It's much more of a pleasant, casual listener, this one. This old track with Van Morrison and Cliff Richard can be a pretty thin sounding.
Shine a light on me. Open up my eyes.
But it sounds smooth
So I
here.
can see.
Smooth and pleasant.
When I look up in the darkest night,
Dare even
and I
say
know
round.
everything is gonna be alright.
Voices are
In
great.
deep confusion and great despair, when I reach out for him, he is there.
I mean, it almost sounds like a conclusion already, but this is smooth. This is nice. This track really have a tendency to sound both tinny, and on some systems that rim shot can even sound like almost like a little gunshot or bullet, like really, really tight, really, really thin. It has more body here. It melts together with the entire presentation better. And that's sometimes the problem with really, really high-resolution systems. We sometimes forget the music in it all. It's this track I would be bothered in different ways by the sound of this track, but here, it's just a source of enjoyment. Really, you don't get that magical soundstage you can hear on really good speakers, where you just go, wow, it's like it renders a person standing there in front of you, or there's so much depth to the sound that you can place each instrument in a 3D space. It's much more two-dimensional here, but it's not without a soundstage, but it's way more two-dimensional. I'm even having a little tiny bit of toe in the setup here. And the soundstage is what lacks the most. But for the casual listener, maybe, not sitting focused like this in between the speakers, but just chilling in a sofa in the room, or reading a book, or having a glass of wine, watching out the window. This sound is just really nice and relaxing. There's nothing that annoys my ear, like weird crossovers affecting the mid-range or anything like that. The mid-range is the party piece here, of course, but it's nice and round and full sounding with this setup right now. Let's just, we need to challenge them a bit with some old and some new and some very modern. Let's start off with some old.
My baby don't care for shows. My baby don't care for clothes. My baby just cares for me. My baby don't care for cars and races. My baby don't care for high tone please. Liz Taylor is not a style. And even Lana Turner's smile. Something he can't.
Yeah, it sounds way more rustique, if that's a word at all. It sounds way more rustique than with a modern speaker. Still, unnecessary details are not revealed that much, and it really makes more music more enjoyable, I must say. The absolute dynamics of the system, it's not brutal. It's a little to the soft side. Let's see if this is too loud. The Quality of Mercy by the crazy woman Michelle Shocked.
In the temple seeking gain, all your senators and lawyers,
Yeah, she's even pissed in this track.
all you victims and you heroes, your petitions to complain, all your murderers and martyrs.
Yeah, this track has the ability to really, really sound like crazy in your face. The most impressive reproduction I ever heard was with the Genelex in the Dream Speaker series, the 8381As. That was like, that stuff was just carved out in the air right in front of you.
All you hypocrites and liars.
And it was a physical thing listening to this, with the voice just being completely crisp and clean. Here we get a nice, rounded, cozy version that goes well. I just feel like having a pipe with some nice tobacco and maybe a little scotch, listening to this version.
Did not I crucify my Lord? Did not I bind him in chains?
But it's really cozy sounding. There's nothing bothering me. I'm not feeling robbed in any way. I think that's a really important takeaway. So let's dig into the list and see if I can find something a little more modern, maybe. Here's a great live recording, really intimate, raspy vocals and just simple, great room feeling. And those slaps on the acoustic guitar is just can be felt, on bigger systems.
Troubles with sharing,
Very polite version.
trouble with that dress that's as black as my heart on this train. Troubles with sharing, trouble.
I'm a bit sorry for the noise you have in the left channel. That's my neighbor that is doing some serious landscaping in their garden, trying to clean it up. So that's what you hear in the left channel. Once in a while, that's machines out there on the other side of the house. So we have to live with that. This is a track that can be extremely well sounding, good sounding on really capable systems. It's actually a reference track for me in regards to the Technics SBR1 reference speakers I usually listen to. Those are extremely good with really great recordings, and in particular, this is not the best recording ever. Tea in the Sahara will sound extremely open and deep in the soundstage, and there's so many little details that can actually be heard when you listen on a really high resolution system. I just kind of discovered this track, rediscovered it, a while back, listening to it on the Technique speakers. I never noticed it before and didn't find it particularly fantastic sounding. But on those speakers, that was just the perfect match. It was a brand new experience of Tea in the Sahara.
Beneath the sheltering sky, we have this strange obsession.
And here we're just back to the ordinary. It's like great vocal.
Tea in the Sahara with you. Tea in the Sahara.
But that instrument separation and air and insight that fascinated me so much with this particular track, it's not there. It's just a cozy presentation version. So that is, no matter the track, is a thing with this system. Nice and dry. This one is not allowed on YouTube, so we are not gonna play anything of the AC/DC Boogeyman. Great track, by the way. If you have a horn system, try try jamming with the with that track. It's amazing. This is also really tough on the bass.
Check it. Word is born. Yeah.
I'll love you anyway, baby. Anyway and every way I can. 'Cause I'm that kind of man. Yeah. I'll give you everything, baby.
And here the curtains are moving from the air being pushed out of the subwoofer. And it's totally linear. It's a track that can sound really bloomy and weird with that very, very low-end bass. But here, it just totally under control. Sounds very, very good, actually.
Decision, just undress, love. I know the right position. Come on, trust me, girl. Throw this rock up on your hand. I'll give you.
I can't imagine how hard the Darlies would be at work here without the subwoofer. That talk box can have a tendency to be a little rough and harsh. Nothing like that here, just sounded cool.
Players, put your pinky rings up to the moon. Girls, what y'all trying to do?
24 karat magic in the air.
Head to toe, so clear. Look out. Pop, pop, it's showtime. 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 Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know.
Yeah, this track sounds just amazing on this system. It's really mixed for the modern age, you know, with dynamic, limited, small systems and so on. It really pops out of these speakers and sound marvelous. It's really interesting. I should pursue some more modern music that is mixed for this day and age for consumption on headphones and smaller speakers, because it really pops out of the speakers here. It has nothing to do with hi-fi as such, if you want realism of real instruments, and more so than other systems that are more correct sounding or more hi-fi or more capable dynamics-wise. I mean, sometimes you need to hide the truth a bit, and they're really good at that. So let's double-check that notion a bit. A classic like Tin Pan Alley with Stevie Ray Vaughan, that is all about dynamics. That guitar, those vocals, that really bites. If you don't have the dynamics on a high level, it just doesn't move you. And it also totally fails to engage me here. It's just really flat sounding, boring. So there we have some really interesting observations, I think, with the really dynamic things, music that comes to life. I would not listen to Stormy Monday by Eva Cassidy, for instance. That would just sound death and unrealistic. But if we go for these more compressed, modern sounding things, I'm sure that Sam Smith and Kim Petras, Unholy, definitely a modern mix. And the curtains are moving.
Look at girl. She got married to a boy like you. She'd kick you out if she ever knew about all the.
I mean, music like this just really works. It pops out of the speakers like it's intended, that's for sure. So, and that's why it sounds like it on a really good sounding system. So that's one of the contrasts of hi-fi, I guess. depending on what you like, you should really try different systems. I hear a lot of different music, so I really like something that is a little bit middle down the road, maybe, where I don't get bored listening to really realistic things like Tin Pan Alley, you know, where the dynamics need to be insane to capture you, and where it's not that revealing that you will sit and just skip a track like Unholy we just heard here. That's really the magic, and that was what I think we discovered or captured when we did the Dream Speaker review of the new DALI Epicore. That speaker was capable of finding that middle road in a really big way. And I haven't really forgot about it. I mean, I'm trying to visualize a pair of these as my new reference, I'll say. But it's a decent pile of money, 40,000 euros. So I have to sell my body some more.
Everything!
Yeah, about damn time. Lizzo, modern track, very bassy. For some reason, I think that track can sound okay, even though it's compressed to death on really good sounding systems. And strangely enough, it does translate that well on this system. It's just a big packed away everything. Not really exciting. This track is one of those that can put some water in your eyes. It's called The Things We Handed Down. Wonderful track. And here you can really hear how good resolution you have, and you can really hear your room in action, because in the very beginning of the track, very faint in the background, you can actually hear an engineer going, take blah, blah, blah. Which is definitely an error. It's something they haven't spotted when they did the mix because it's so faint. But on a really high resolution system, you always hear it actually. It's quite funny. Here, I didn't even notice it. But it's an interesting track for just that little thing. And then you can have a little sobbing and crying about the wonderful lyrics as well. Got great pianos in here, usually a great vocal.
Don't know much about you, I don't know who you are. We've been doing fine without you, but we could only go so far. I don't know why you chose us, were you watching from above? Is there someone there that knows us, said we'd give you all our love? Laugh just like your mother, will you sigh like your old man? Will something skip a generation?
Gets me every time. Yeah, sounding great. It's again, it's not portraying the details or the bad parts. It's really presenting everything in a warm, rounded, easygoing way with kind of held back dynamics, so you don't have that transient response you would have with the more modern speakers. Okay, so I think I'm ready to conclude a bit here. This is a cozy sounding system, especially with the tunings we did and the room correction. Very smooth and works nice. So there's no distractions in the sound, you can say. We removed all the distractions. The harsh top end is gone completely. We have a nice, smooth low end that it doesn't have any crazy bumps or lumps or anything like that. So it's harmonious the way the sound is presented. And that brings us to the inner quality of the sound, which is definitely very pleasing, very, very decent and good with almost all kinds of music. It totally lacks the realism of hi-fi that I personally love a lot with realistic recordings. And I really got an eye-opener here in this little session, listening to those modern tracks, Unholy, for instance, or the 24K Magic by Bruno Mars. Those two tracks really popped out and felt really engaging. And they are mixed for the modern age. They are mixed for those Bluetooth speakers and headphones and all that. And usually don't sound that engaging on a really high-resolution system. So that's where you need to ask yourself what kind of listener you are. If you're the cozy kind of casual listener that doesn't sit down and perform focused listening where you expect a stage of musicians with acoustic music and it sounds totally realistic, like when you hear it live, is your thing, then you shouldn't go for anything like this. But going for older speakers like these with all those other kinds of music, it's really nice. I mean, it's really pleasuring. There's nothing that picks my brain as being annoying or in the way, or all the nastiness is just being pulled away from me. And that's what I got. Price-wise, I introduced the 3400, which is a mildly expensive integrated amplifier. So the total price for the system is not that cheap now, but we were still able to get decent results using that AV receiver, right? That was no money. But with a system like this, old speakers that was developed in another age, combining it with the subwoofer to get more out of it, there's really no way around modern technology, modern DSP correction, room correction, and such things. They can be obtained in cheaper than with the 3400, but I doubt that it will be as easy to use and the results will be as easy to get as I did here. So what did I learn from these experiments? Well, I learned, first of all, that you can easily get great sound for almost no money. That an old AV receiver can be fully capable of just being a stereo integrated amplifier, even though it was deemed totally worthless for AV use due to its video formats and whatnot. So have a look at some of those things. If you are looking for a really, really, really cheap amp, you get a lot of sound worth for next to nothing there. I also learned that in terms of sound and what I like, that a casual sounding, not that dynamic loudspeaker can be a pleasure to listen to in a more casual setting. And I also found tracks that I usually would skip on a really high resolution system, really worthwhile listening to. I mean, I got aroused almost by listening to the 24K Magic on these speakers, or Unholy by Sam, what is his name? Whatever. But that's a really important lesson, because if you're not that focused listener and just want warm, great sound that makes you feel good, you might be looking in the wrong places. And that's really what makes hi-fi so interesting to me. And now Aslan needs to go and take a piss, he says. So I will leave you with that and remind you all to just listen and have fun with your audio. And please check out all the other stuff on the channel and let me know what you think about this very, very loose, very chaotic format where I just ad-libbed along the way and threw the camera around and forgot it sometimes. Let me know what you think about that and see you soon here back on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. And
If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake, baked a cake, baked a cake. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. How'd you do, how'd you do, how'd you do? Had you dropped me a letter, I'd have